in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats, with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. Oh, I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it. My name, my name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible. In fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption, breaking our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. I can say to all who have worked so hard in the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent, and now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the war on our children. I've already described some of my personal experiences and struggles with the government's censorship industrial complex. I want to say a word about the Ukraine war. The military-industrial complex has provided us with a familiar comic book justification like they do on every war.
Monitoring this from RFK Jr.,
this
but
one is a noble effort
that
to stop
was
a supervillain,
so
Vladimir Putin,
much
invading the Ukraine and then to thwart his Hitler-like march across Europe. In fact, tiny Ukraine is a proxy in a geopolitical struggle.
Doug Heye with us, as well as Johanna Maska. She's the host of the Press Advance podcast. She's a former Obama White House director of Press Advance. He's talking about wanting, and we've seen a press filing or a court filing in Pennsylvania. Yeah. So he's saying that he's taking himself off of these ballot access challenges in states where he would be a spoiler, right? Mm-hmm. These battleground states, like, tell me if I've got this right, Doug. But when it comes to a red state or a blue state, you can sort of, if you want to vote for him, you can then register how you feel about him. And then in the crazy possible chance of a 269 tie between Trump and Harris, then maybe he can just ride that all the way to the White House?
Yeah, I was watching that, and Donald Trump last week stood and said in front of a bunch of groceries and said, I haven't seen any Cheerios in a long time. I had Cheerios for breakfast. This was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And trying to get any logic out of that is good luck with that. Because it's, one, you can't understand what he says. Two, if you can't understand what he says. And I'm reminded of a line in Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles when somebody gets up and gives an indecipherable speech. He says, who can argue with that? That's authentic frontier gibberish, and that's exactly what that is.
Yeah, go ahead. Priscilla.
Well, I was going to say, to your point, though, Brianna, the big overarching issue here for both campaigns, for the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign, is the third-party sort of X factor and what that means for turnout in November. So even if what he was saying wasn't easy to follow, it is still the concern of either campaign, which is partially why Trump is looking for that endorsement, that these voters are sort of the X factor in what they decide to do with RFK Jr. going into November when it's going to be such a tight race. And we've seen that before back in 2016.
And yet his supporters may be confused because we're even confused based on his own statements. Now we've gotten a fresh statement from his campaign clarifying previous remarks in which initially in this court fighting in Pennsylvania, it said that he would be endorsing Donald Trump. His campaign came out and said that's not what's happening. Then he, in his remarks, said that he was throwing his support behind Trump over the war in Ukraine, what he described as the war on our children, and chronic disease was another one. It's hard to make sense of. Johanna Maska, what do you see in all of this as this rambling speech goes on and he launches attacks against Democrats?
Well, and look, he's reminding us who he is. I mean, he's the troubled son of a famous politician who has had drug problems, problems with women, nefarious business dealings with Venezuela. I mean, there were a lot of questions about his intentions in this campaign from the get-go. He is not ready for prime time and certainly not ready for the presidency. I mean, he's never held elected office, but he got some momentum because a lot of Americans didn't want Trump and they didn't want Biden. And I think we have to be careful as Democrats not to demonize the views of his supporters. There are a lot of people who are skeptical of modern medicine right now. We don't need to demonize them. We need to seek to understand. We need to go after those followers. I don't know if there's people in, Pennsylvania who are following exactly what he's saying, but I think, he's reminded us who he is. So now it's time for the Democrats to really go after his supporters who have questions about Trump too.
Okay, Joanna, seek to understand people who believe that kids should not get childhood vaccines that keep them safe. I mean, I understand there's a lot of debate, and you can say whatever you will of the COVID vaccine, but what he's talked about and the folks who've gravitated towards him, they have a particular set of views on something broader than that.
Well, and you're right. The truth is I'm from the Respect, Empower, Include original Obama team. And people are going to have some different views, ones that are very hard to follow for other people who have more information. But that is not a reason that we should demonize them and say that they're idiots or that they're ignorant or that, they're part of the problem. We need to seek to understand what their perspective is based on, a lot of misinformation, some of it coming from RFK Jr., and try to give the right information so that they can make up their mind.
So, okay, we just need to be clear here. And Joanna, if you can stay with us. Now you have Trump RFK Jr. encouraging his supporters to now support Trump, while also encouraging them in blue states or red states to just vote for whoever they want to. Cohesive. And
saying that he's not actually ending his campaign, he's simply suspending it, and saying to a single woohoo in the room that he has a path toward the White House. Doug, I should point out we're watching live images of Donald Trump in Las Vegas. He's got an event there before he heads to Arizona later. Doug, when Donald Trump, as we've seen in recent days, makes statements saying that his heart's in the right place, that they believe some of the same things, he's aligning himself with someone who has said some really weird stuff. And Democrats are now attacking Trump and J.D. Vance, calling them weird. How much does the label now sink in with voters, given that he's seemingly aligned with RFK Jr.?
Trump likes to run three-ring circuses, and he feels that he's the ringmaster and knows what he's doing. This has moved from bizarre to carnival with RFK Jr. The summer of RFK Jr. started with the brain worm, ended with the bear claw, right? And so I think most voters overwhelmingly are going to just see that for what it is. And sure, maybe they do believe some of the same things. Maybe they both believe in gravity. Maybe they both believe the earth revolves around the sun, some of those things. But ultimately, he's the most marginal candidate that we've seen in a long time. But the reality is all of these races all these states we're talking about could be won or lost on the margins. So you still have to take it seriously. Yeah,
and to your point, and also to Joanna's, where she's talking about sort of this trying to appeal very generously to people who are quite different from, I think, what you heard over the course of the DNC the last 4 nights. Democrats do worry. It's interesting. You listen, Doug, publicly, they're going to say they don't worry. That's sort of the refrain. But when you get them to talk privately, they do worry because the margins may be so slim. It can come down to just a few votes here or there. They do worry that this could make a difference even if they think that it shouldn't.
You know, one of the smartest Democratic operatives is a young lady named Liz Smith, and she is an assassin. When she goes after you, you get mortally wounded. And she spent the past several months focused on one person, and that was RFK Jr. And every day she was out there putting information on, why he was unacceptable and so forth. She has done her job. He's now out of it. And that's where mostly he could hurt Biden. But also, let's be clear, none of us are smart enough to know of the RFK voter, even if they're 3% here or 2% there, how they break down, do they all show up, and in what direction they go. We know this is going to be a close election, and a lot of things can be won or lost on margins. No one is smart enough to know where the RFK Jr. vote goes.